Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, any quick question? I hear an echo. That's weird. So does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns regarding it's so true, Georgette, about the upcoming assignment? Um,
I have a question.
okay, shoot. I don't know who's talking, but shoot.
It's Georgette. Just to like clarify, like last time, only one person in the group submits a group plan, correct?
Yes.
And then
I
it's
only need
due.
one plan. I don't need to read, five.
Yeah, yeah, that would be
Same.
redundant.
And
And then it's due tomorrow night by 11:55, correct?
uh, I'm not
According to
sure.
Candy.
I'm not sure if I said Thursday or Friday, but yeah, I believe it is Thursday for your group.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Hmm.
And then I specifically have like a question for my group, but we should just wait till the end of class to like discuss that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Huh? All right, so we're getting down to the nitty gritty. I think we only have what? This lecture, the lecture next week, and then we have presentations, and then we have the final exam. So we are really getting close to the end. It's that time of year, as Georgette wrote. So I guess I'm having a conversation with Georgette's group after class. Okay, so I do believe I left off talking about this slide. I got to the very end. I don't remember if I talked about house fees and facility charge, but if I didn't, what does a house fee or facility charge mean? It's a surcharge, right? So obviously we haven't been to a concert in a long time because of COVID, but when we did go to concerts, if you did look on your ticket or wondered why your ticket had these surcharges, one of the surcharges on your ticket, this is why if you buy like a high-end ticket for a big concert, it's the charge of the whatever they charged for the ticket plus all these extra surcharges or taxes. And so one of these surcharges is a house fee or facility charge. And the facility charge or house fee is essentially it all that revenue goes to the venue. The venue essentially uses that revenue, or they're supposed to use that revenue for maintenance, right? So they're supposed to use it to keep the facility clean, to help pay for electricity, those sorts of things. It's whatever the overhead is in the facility, and also to keep the facility nice, clean, and safe for future events. So industry is more reliant on live performances. So as we all know, the uh, sales of music has dropped significantly. So in other words, a lot of us are no longer really buying our music, at least not in a traditional sort of way, in a sense that we're not necessarily downloading singles or albums and paying a fee for that, or we're no longer really buying CDs, although we are buying more and more vinyl. So vinyl has continued this comeback. It's almost a decade long now that vinyl has made this resurgence. I think it started in 2013 where it started ticking up in sales, and it's gained a lot of momentum. And now vinyl sales have actually exceeded CD sales, which I think is the first time ever, I believe. Anyway, so the way we consume music nowadays is more like, well, through streaming, or we pay some service, right? We subscribe to some service, and that's how we listen to our music. Or maybe you download it onto your phone or whatever, and you just play that music. So we don't necessarily, quote unquote, buy music the old traditional way like we used to. or at least the way we used to, not necessarily the way you used to. And so because of this, uh, now live music has become much more important. The labels, managers, so on and so forth, are really now encouraging artists to get out there and to perform live. And labels are really also encouraging the idea of live performances, like going on tours or performing at music festivals, because they see this as a means or a way to promote that artist's music, right? So maybe if you go into Coachella or Stagecoach or one of these concerts, maybe you weren't too familiar with that particular artist. You went to go watch another artist, and this person was the opening act, and you really liked this particular act, and you end up buying their music. So, like for instance, many years ago, when Madonna was first starting out, I went to go watch her perform at a concert, and her opening act was the Beastie Boys. And the Beastie Boys were, I was like, they were getting booed by everybody. And I was like, going, these guys are so cool. And I remember the guy was, as they were getting booed, was going, we're going to make it big someday, you watch. And everybody started laughing. And I was like, going, he's right. But anyways, the point being is, after that concert, I went out and bought some Beastie Boys stuff. I was like, these guys are pretty cool. And so, but if they hadn't been performing with Madonna as the opening act, I would have never seen them. No questions. All right, so moving on to the next slide. So the summer music festivals, which is not surprising, right? We're trending towards saturation. Saturation essentially means that there's just no more room or space in the marketplace for these summer music festivals, because they just keep popping up everywhere. And what happens with saturation is that it's very difficult to stand out in the marketplace when there's a music festival, every weekend during the summertime. And so we're quickly headed that way. And so it would appear, right? It logically would make sense that the summer would be the best time to tour, because obviously the weather is better. You can have more concerts outdoors, those sorts of things. But in reality, honestly, the best time to tour is actually during the winter. The reason being is because it's easier to stand out in the winter time than in the summertime. Now, that being said, of course, there's obstacles to overcome if you're going to tour during the winter. The big one being the fact that, the weather for most part of the country, excluding the Southern California, is terrible, right? Or really cold. And so, but again, the best time to tour in reality is actually the winter. Now, the one thing that you have to work around, which is kind of going down here to where it says stadium tours, is to bear in mind, obviously, in the winter, you cannot really perform outdoors because it's too cold. And so you're going to have to perform in venues like the Staples Center or Honda Center or something like that. And so the issue or the challenge with that is that you have to work around the tenants, right? The sports teams are tenants to these venues. And so whether it's, the local hockey team, whether it's the local basketball team, they have dibs to the venue. And so you're going to have to work a little bit harder, or at least the booking agent's going to have to work a little bit harder to find you an available date in that city, in that particular venue, because they have to work around the tenant, the permanent tenant, which is usually, it could be a football team if it's a bigger stadium, or it could be a basketball team if it's a smaller arena, or a hockey team if it's a smaller arena. So again, best time to tour is the winter, but again, it's more difficult. So stadium tours, when I refer to stadium tours, those are venues that seat at least 35,000 seats, right? So if we think about stadium tours, that'd be having a tour over at SoFi or over at the Coliseum or maybe the Rose Bowl or some venue like that that's pretty big. And that being said, generally speaking, stadium tours, right, you have to be a gigantic act or immensely popular to fill up these stadium tours, these gigantic venues. So, if you're a relatively new artist, you probably don't want to go on a stadium tour unless you're going as a group with a bunch of other bands or a few other bands, and maybe collectively you could sell out a venue that's 35,000 seats. But again, generally, only the biggest and the best, quote unquote, best performers go on these stadium tours because it is difficult to fill up these big venues. The other challenge when you're doing a stadium tour is that you have to book at least 6 months to 2 years in advance. And so the point that I'm trying to get sort of is, if you're going to work as somebody who's booking talent, you got to book this talent in these venues long in advance. So if you're not good with time management, or procrastination is something that you have to deal with, being a booking agent may not be the best job for you, because you got to work way in advance. So again, you must work around the tenants, and usually I'm referring to, in the case of stadiums, are usually university football teams, or perhaps even a professional football team. So the key contact usually is the marketing team. And so, well, you guys aren't doing the actual music, so then doesn't necessarily apply to this class. But the key contact, if you're going to work for the artist on the artist side, is the marketing team that works for the venue. The venue has a marketing team in place, usually in-house, especially if they're a bigger venue, or if they're owned by, let's just say, like Live Nation. The marketing team is critical because the marketing team in that particular venue, they know the market way better than you do as a promoter, or as a manager, or as the booking agent, right? So the marketing team in the venue knows, okay, in this market in the past, we've sold out concerts by doing social media, and we've used, these influencers, or we promoted the concert on these particular billboards on these particular intersections, or maybe we did like we bought an ad, or we have done print advertising in a specific newspaper, those sorts of things. So the marketing team, again, in that particular market, you want to contact the in-house marketing team for the venue, because they know the market a lot better than you do. And you want to get them on your side so that they can help you sell out the performance. Smaller venues. So one of the big trends right now in the industry, yes, of course, music festivals are a big deal, and they're obviously a trend right now. Stadium tours obviously are critical too, but the one thing that is becoming apparent, or at least pre-COVID, I think even post-COVID, I think it's going to continue, is the idea of having concerts in these smaller, intimate theaters. So, that seat between 1,000 or 6,000 folks. Like, I think is it called the Ford Theater? I think it's called the Ford Theater. At least it used to be called the Ford Theater when I used to go to concerts. But there's a small venue outside of Universal City. It was a pretty small, intimate venue. The Universal Amphitheater, I think they tore it down. But when that was around, that was an example of a smaller, intimate theater. Does anybody remember the name of the venue over near Griffith Park? Oh, shoot. I can't remember now. Does anybody remember? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? The Greek. Thank you. The Greek Theater, that's also, I think that seats less than 6,000, or about 6,000, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But thank you for that. Yes, the Greek Theater would be another example of sort of these smaller venues. that even if you're a big act, you are trending towards performing in these smaller venues. The reason being is because it's very intimate, right? These smaller venues, you can really connect well with the crowd when it's that small, and it's good for both the performer and it's good also for the audience. And so there's a lot of the experience. You can't match it in a smaller arena, at least in most cases. And so that's why it's becoming more and more popular. Now, radius clauses and exclusivity. These are being used by larger promoters, like, for instance, AEG is doing this, and I also believe Live Nation is doing this too. So what they're doing, or it's being pushed by these large promoters, is the idea of radius clauses and exclusivity. Has anybody ever heard of what exactly is a radius clause and what exactly is exclusivity? Okay, so by the way, I don't know how many of you have been involved or heard about the what are Cal State Fullerton's event? Gosh, is it a Evening Under the Stars? Fullerton does this event, this concert event called Evening Under the Stars. I can't remember anymore, but I've had a few students come talk to me afterwards because they've had issues booking talent, and they go, "Oh, Puente, I should have taken your class before, or so I would have known what these radius clauses meant." And so they've actually lost people that they have actually booked. They've lost these performers because in the performers not agreement with another venue or another promoter, there was radius clauses. In other words, if the promoter, or I should say, if the act had done a concert within, they can't do a concert within 100 miles of the large promoter's venue. So let's just say that, this performer did a concert over at Coachella, just throwing it out there. And the performer agreed to perform at Coachella and signed the agreement that he also agreed to the radius clause. And the radius clause essentially says, if you read AEG's contracts or Live Nation's contracts, is that they'll say oftentimes, okay, well, if you're performing in one of our venues, you cannot perform at another venue in the market within a 100-mile radius. And so that means that, anything within 100 miles, they cannot perform. And that's good, Georgette. And so along with the radius clause, there's also this thing called exclusivity. And so, which is tied to the radius clause. And so exclusivity means that if you decide to perform in these large promoters' venues, right, you agree that you're not going to perform at another venue in the market 30 days prior or 60 days prior or 30 days after or 60 days after. In other words, you're kind of giving these large promoters a window of exclusivity where you're only performing in that market, over the next 60 days or 120 days, whatever the window is of exclusivity. Yeah, Coachella has a lot of rules. I'm not sure if that was one of the rules. Um, I have read their rules. I don't remember reading that one, but they have it's a pretty long contract. Yeah, it's you really honestly need to be an attorney to read that thing, but it's a lot. There's a lot of rules about what you can't do as a performer. Now, as as Georgette kind of is pointing out, yes, there's a lot of rules, but if you're like a big act, I don't know, if you're like, I don't know, if you're Beyonce, somebody who's just, transcendent, who's just, gigantic. If you're a big person or a big act like Beyonce or somebody who is just really popular, these radius clauses and this exclusivity doesn't apply to them because they're going to say no. They're going to say, well, if you're not going to let me perform at this venue, then I'm not going to perform at Coachella or at Stagecoach. So there is room to negotiate whatever is said in the contract. So for those of you who read contracts, understand contracts, it's important to know that you can negotiate what's on the contract. And especially if you're a bigger act, you can certainly negotiate. If you're a smaller act, and it's different. If you're starting out, then you kind of have to play by the rules. But if you're bigger, then you don't have to play by the rules. It's kind of like the ironies of capitalism, right? You get more free stuff, or you can get away with more stuff when you're rich than when you're poor. So it's one of the things that makes capitalism kind of unfair. Anyways, International Entertainment Buyers Association is the trade organization that oversees the industry, and so that usually encompasses people who are bookers and those sorts of people. They're the ones, people from Live Nation, AEG, those sorts of things, are the groups that, or people who are part of this trade organization. So before I move on to the next slide, I don't know how many of you are interested in the music industry, but if you are, you should all join NARIP. It's a pretty good organization to meet industry professionals, and you learn a lot about the business side of music, way beyond whatever they're learning here in the capstone class or perhaps other classes. Yes. So this is the industry as right now as we see it. Obviously because of COVID, right? The industry lost a lot of money because of the nationwide shutdown for the most part of live events. And last year before COVID, the industry is tracking to make about $30 billion. And so it's now dipped, to under 20 billion. So it's a pretty significant drop. I'm not 100% sure when we're going to fully open venues again to where they're, at 100% capacity. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but in the meantime, these companies are taking a big hit. And so Live Nation is the largest, as you can see here, by far. one interesting thing that Live Nation did to sort of become bigger, they decided that, you know, they were going to be, they decided that we're going to own the venues, but also book talent. And that's what AG sort of does too. But Live Nation really is clearly the leader within the industry. The top revenue stream within the industry is live performance admission, live performance admission. So live performance admission to whether it's a music event, a sporting event, or some sort of, let's say, theater or whatever, again, is the top revenue stream. Live admission to live performances. So Rod Stewart, the reason I talk about Rod Stewart just a little bit is because of this. Now, they're really not quite sure how many people. This is Sao Paulo, Brazil. I don't know if anybody's been to Brazil. Pretty cool place. But so this is one of the famous beaches in Sao Paulo. And this was I want to say a New Year's Eve event. And apparently between 3 and 3.5 million people went to go see Rod Stewart perform. Now, the reason it's debatable and they're not really quite sure how many people actually truly went to go see Rod Stewart perform was obviously, if you look at closely on the screen, I don't know if you guys can see it, but on the big screens, you see a picture of, I want to say it's Pope John Paul III. But anyways, there is a mass going on. And so people probably went to go see the mass along the ocean. So I'm sure that was a big draw. It was also free. So again, this is why they don't really know how many people went. And they're also having a fireworks show. And so this is why the figure is disputed in terms of like, well, how many people actually went to go watch Rod Stewart perform at this particular event? Because they really don't know. But many people point to this as being the largest gathering of people to watch a concert. But again, they're not quite sure how many people actually went. Oh, really? Oh, for 2020, 2022. Yeah, I think you're not, Alexa, I don't think you're going to see any big artists tour until the fall. If even if then, I think September, October is when you probably see more live events. So yeah, kind of sucks. So especially because I like going to concerts. I really miss it. What else? Oh, what is the top tour ever? So there's two different figures. I'll just give you the figure without inflation. So the biggest tour without inflation is Ed Sheeran? I can never pronounce his name correctly. I think it's Sheeran or Sharon. Sheeran, I think. The Divide Tour, that's the biggest tour ever without inflation. I want to say he made, oh gosh, $775 million on his worldwide tour, something like that. It was some sort of insane number. If you do count inflation, then the U2 concert is the biggest. I can't remember which one it was. But again, Ed Sheeran, without inflation, it is the biggest concert tour ever, the Divide Tour. No, not in terms of money. The Reputation Stadium Tour. Not, are you talking about average or overall revenue made? Hmm. I'll have to double check, but I want to say last time I read it, it was still Divide and U2 was second.
I recently saw an article, like right now, I pulled it up, and it said that the Reputation Stadium tour is officially the highest grossing tour in US history. So
Hmm.
I was like, oh,
U.S. history. I'm talking about world.
okay. Oh, that's what it was. So you said the world. I was thinking US. That makes sense.
So, but thank you for pointing that out because I didn't know. That's good. It's always good to learn new things. Booking agent. So the booking agent, I don't know again how many of you are interested in working in live music, but if you're going to be working for the talent side, or even I guess if you want to work for like an AEG or a Live Nation, they do also have bookers. Um, so the booking agent is usually the first job that you get generally when you first graduate from college, or if you decide just to jump into the music industry straight out of high school. Um, the booking agent is usually your entry level gig, and so some big responsibilities that the booking agent has is finding live appearances. So whether that so generally speaking, right, the booking agent is working with the manager, and he's also working with the band's gosh, the business manager and the manager. And so along with those two guys or women, the booking agent is going to get some information from those two folks about where they want to tour and where the band wants to tour. And then the booking agent's going to, okay, I'm going to find you live appearances, whether it's locally, whether it's regionally, whether it's nationally, whether it's internationally. And so the booking agent's going to be on the phone or sending emails to all the bookers or talent buyers that he or she knows. And then they got to route the tours. And routing the tours is actually pretty tricky because all it takes is to have like, you know, one venue not being able to accommodate your dates, where you have to sort of readjust and work things out again. And so routing tours, it it sounds easy, but it's actually really pretty hard to route the tours and just be able to work with all these different bookers in terms of trying to figure out how you're going to organize and set up the routing of your tour. And so the parameters again are usually set by whoever the management team is on the band side, but it's also sometimes also can be set on intuition, or your gut can tell you, okay, I think the manager or the band people are going to be okay with this. And so the booking agent has to negotiate deals with the talent buyers and or the venue in each market. And so whether that talent buyer is, a Live Nation or AEG, or whether it's an independent promoter, they have to negotiate the deals either with, again, the talent buyer and or the venue in each market. And the venue again could be attached to Live Nation or AEG, or that venue could be independent. They have to negotiate payments with the venue. In other words, they have to sort of figure out, okay, um, our act likes a guaranteed front end deal, right? So in other words, a pay to play. If you want our act or this talent to perform in your venue, you need to pay the act X number of dollars before they perform, right? This idea of pay to play. And it's a guaranteed front end deal sort of thing. And or you can negotiate, which is trickier, back end deals. Back end deals are usually based off of ticket sales or royalties of whatever the venue agrees to pay the talent. So what I mean by that is, let's say you have a $20 ticket, and your royalty for every ticket sale is $2, 10%. So for every ticket sold, you get, you know, $2, which again, back ends are tricky. And so, or do you want to negotiate a versus deal? And versus deals are usually only the better acts can negotiate versus deals. Versus deals means that you take the guaranteed amount versus whatever you agreed is going to be part of the back end. And whatever amount is higher, the back end deal or the front end, whatever amount's higher or greater, you go with that amount. And so that's it's called the versus deal. And so that's again typically only the big people like a Taylor Swift or popular folks can negotiate that. And for the booking agent's job or work or labor, they're going to charge, the band or the management team a commission, right? A commission for them to book either one act, right, or to book a long tour. They're going to charge a commission. Usually, it's for one act. It's about 15 to 20%, depending on who the booking agent is. And if you're wondering what a typical split is between the act and the promoter, typically it's 85% goes to the act and 15% goes to the promoter when it comes to the revenue for a live performance. Now, that being said, of course, the act can ask for more than 85%, and the promoter can also sort of demand a little bit more than 15%. Again, the bigger the act, the more money they can demand. So the promoter, this is the reason why, by the way, promoters like Live Nation decided that, the split's not big enough for us. So not only are we going to get a split for the revenue generated for the concert, but what we're going to do also is we're going to own the venue, and the money made in the venue, we're also going to make on top of the 15%. So that's the reason why Live Nation and other big companies decided to start buying venues, because they didn't like this 85-15 split. Okay, so this person talks a little bit about being a booking agent.
My name is Peter Loomis. I'm an agent at New Frontier Touring in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been with New Frontier for 8 years. We're a boutique booking agency that handles a roster of about 90 to 100 artists. There's 8 agents and about 8 support staff, contract department, assistants, business manager. The company represents all different genres, from Americana to indie rock to classic rock, from arena acts like the Avett Brothers to artists that are selling 1,000 to 2,000 tickets like Highly Suspect, to more developmental artists like the Western Den, Ages and Ages, the Cave Singers, and the list goes on and on. Agents handle the day-to-day negotiations and operations of touring and any live appearance that an artist makes, essentially for money. We handle talking to festival buyers and club buyers, planning out the routing of a tour and negotiating the deal, the ticket prices, what venue is appropriate in any given market. Some of the things that agents do not do is they do not promote the shows. They will negotiate a advertising budget with the talent buyer of the event, but they're not the ones on the street handing out flyers or deciding what social media to boost, and they're not, handling geo-targeted posts. They're more on the operations before an event gets announced and live. The tools that are helpful for working with an artist, it all depends on the artist and where they are in their career, but having any sort of tour history is the most useful tool to know where they've played, where they haven't played, how many people were there to see them, how much merch they sold, radio history they might have in that market. Anything that is market specific is probably the most important tool for an agent to have. Once a show is confirmed, the assets that are very important are anything the promoter can use to help advertise the show. So images, bios, videos, any links to social media or their music. Those are all assets that we always have in hand that we relay to the venue or event so that they can properly market the show. When I'm starting to think about booking a tour and getting the beginning steps in place, I'll look at their needs and talk to them and see what their expectations are of how long they want to tour for, what's appropriate and how it would be successful for both the artist, the venues that are involved, and obviously the agency side as well. So typically, it will be a combination of markets that they have strengths in, and then obviously when we're routing between those stronger markets, we might play a secondary or tertiary market that we're building in, and we might lean certain direction for different markets if there's any tools that we might have or reasons to go to those markets, whether it's a radio station that's been playing their new single or a strong fan base from Spotify streaming that we can see. Any sort of analytics that we can use to justify playing certain cities is always helpful tools. A slot on a festival is one of the most sought after gigs for any artist or band. They're getting thousands and thousands of submissions, so it's a lot for them to sift through and to know who's worth putting on that noon slot for 30 minutes on the 6th stage and who not to put on it. So when pitching an artist to a festival, any sort of recent press I can give them or history in that market is all useful. I always say the more information that I can tell them, the better. It's always good to be optimistic and show them the trends that we've set up for the lead time, because a big issue with the festivals is they're getting booked 8 to 12 months out. And so it's hard to know the worth of that artist in 8 to 12 months. So you kind of have to line things up with, all the plans being in place and them going well. So a lot might not happen, but it's when building an artist, I think one of the most important things is diversifying, looking at hard ticket plays, looking at support opportunities, festivals, concert series, and using all of those as a combination to grow an artist's career and not just going down one alley only. I've seen it several times where an artist will get all these great support opportunities. They'll go out and tour and play in front of 1,000 people night after night, tour after tour, but they've never taken the time to go back to those cities, play their own show, and build their own, hard ticket worth as a headlining artist. The support slots always seem like
Okay. So hopefully that gave you a good idea of what these a booking agent does. Hopefully my internet continues, as you can just see. Maybe not seeing. My internet's not so good right now. So anyways, so venue marketing. And I'm referring to the actual venue itself. So I'm not referring necessarily to the talent, although talent cares about venue marketing, because without venues, talents can't perform in that venue. And so anyways, venues also spend a lot of time and money marketing themselves, right? And so a big part of that is to manage and extend the venue's brand to all key stakeholders. And so a key stakeholder would be, for instance, who are the stakeholders? It'd be the investors, right? The people who own the actual venue. So the investors would be one, obviously a big one. The community. And so oftentimes you have some iconic venues that stand out within the country or that market, that are part of the branding of the actual city. So the community would be the other stakeholder. If you think about, has anybody ever been to Red Rocks out in near Denver? It's in Morrison, Colorado. Well, for those of you folks who haven't never been to a well, for those of you folks who are into music, right? I don't know how many of you are into music, but really you haven't seen a live event truly until you've been to Red Rocks outside of Denver. It's in Morrison, Colorado. And Red Rocks is this iconic venue outside of Denver. And so it's so iconic that part of, the city or that part of Colorado's brand is attached to the city, right? And so it's because everybody that lives in the Colorado area or has been to Red Rocks goes, wow, this is truly magic. This is truly a magical place, because it really, truly, honestly is. Yes. Ooh, good for you, Aaron. Yeah, basically the venue, right? If those of you who don't know, the venue is essentially it's built into the mountain, right? And so the acoustics that come from the talent that's performing it's bouncing off the rocks, right? And it really does create, this really cool sound, and it really is a unique place to go and watch a concert, just because of the fact that it's built into a mountain, for God's sakes, and the acoustics that bounce off the rocks gives it an interesting sound. So, anyways, that's the second stakeholder, is the community, right? And so the other stakeholders, of course, are the employees, people who work for the actual venue, right? Obviously, as long as the venue is open, they stay employed. So obviously that's important. And of course, the other stakeholder that's really important would be the talent, right? The acts that are going to perform in that particular venue. As we learn anything from COVID is that, once venues shut down, then really, it becomes challenging for performers to get out there and make a name for themselves, or just, stay in the public eye, which is challenging during the time of COVID. Interesting. Interesting. Not that I'm a Blues Traveler fan. They're pretty good, but I just don't happen to be in Denver when Blues Traveler was in Denver, and I was like, oh, we gotta go. We gotta go watch these guys perform. I don't care. We gotta go to Red Rock. I don't care. We just gotta go. I don't care who's performing. So anyway, so these venues produce annual marketing plans. And so the whole point of them doing these marketing plans, it's kind of like saying it's kind of like our, capstone projects in a sense of what you're doing for your client. Same sort of idea when it comes to venue marketing with these marketing plans, is essentially that you're trying to create an objective, right? Okay, for this particular year in this marketing plan, we hope to generate this amount of revenue, right? This is the amount of money we want to reach. And so that, for instance, and also that included in the marketing plan, you're going to have, for instance, like milestones. Okay, by the third month, within the year, we expect to reach this milestone. Within month 6, halfway through, we expect to be at this milestone. At 9 months, we expect to be at this milestone. And so the venue marketing plan is essentially trying to provide, a plan of action for the year, so that for the venue to meet essentially its marketing plan. So within that as well that's going to talk about, okay, this is what we're going to do to advertise not only our venue, but the acts that are coming into our venue. We're going to go to industry events and promote our venue. We're going to get journalists to come and talk about our venue, for instance. We're going to, what else could we do for that? Well, that's pretty good. They're also going to arrange also is publicity, industry-wide publicity events about the venue and the events, hopefully putting on a positive face for the venue. So for instance, I already mentioned that many of the live industry professionals are part of AIBA. And so I don't know if anybody's ever been to a trade organization show. So in these trade organizations shows, they typically have speeches and presentations, I should say, is probably a better word. And in these presentations, what you do is that you show off your venue. And so you're gonna arrange with AIBA, maybe want to talk about Red Rocks at this particular event for the upcoming conference. And then you're gonna have a talk to these other industry professionals who work in the industry, who may have never been to Red Rocks or heard of Red Rocks, but then they're like, oh, dang. It's like, yeah, I want to really, I think this particular act that I have would be perfect for this particular venue. And it's going to help the venue meet whatever goals it has or objective it has. They also provide an in-house ad agency team. Again, if you ever decide to become a promoter, make friends with the venue's in-house agency team, because they're going to help you. They're going to help you assist with the event marketing. Again, they know the market better than you do, so it's important that you reach out to them for help. They're also going to place event-related advertising. So for instance, if you ever drive by the 57 on your way to Fullerton, if you drive and you see the Honda Center on the marquee, usually they have, right, an advertisement advertising the fact that XYZ act's going to perform on this date, and so you should buy your tickets now. And so the venue, right, is going to promote your or your promoter's show on their marquee, for instance. And so that would be an example of you becoming good friends with the marketing team, because the more they like you, the more they're going to work with you, and the sooner they're going to put up stuff advertising the show. That, again, advertises the performance, but also advertises their venue. They're also going to oversee digital and marketing activities, like websites, like the website, like the email, or the content design of the email. They're going to track social media. So these things, the social stuff, the social media stuff is incredibly important nowadays, because obviously for you younger folks, social media is incredibly important to reach you as younger folks. And what else do they track that's important? Any sort of trend within the marketplace they track, which might be helpful in your efforts to sell out the show. Any questions? So most of these successful venues, whether it's, I don't know, the Hollywood Bowl, or I was talking about Red Rocks, all these successful venues, generally speaking, the reason they're successful to a large part is because they have a really good marketing team. And within that really good, whatever good means, usually good within an industry means that the people respect them. They're well respected within the industry as being, you know, high caliber professionals. And so those are the folks that you want to be working with, you know, if you decide to work in not only in music, but in any industry, you want to work with well-respected people. They also have high industry profiles. In other words, a lot of people within the industry also know them. Not only are they well-respected, but they're well-known. People know or familiar with their sales team, or they have a good sales team. And they also have a very competent booking team as well, if they're also going to be booking talent as well. So, in other words, they have a good relationship with artist reps, right? They have a good relationship with talent agencies. They have good relationships with promoters. They have good relationships with show producers. They have good relationships with sports leagues, et cetera, et cetera. So in other words, right, they have lots of contacts and lots of good relationships with lots of different folks, not just within live music, but anything live. They have good working relationships with the convention centers. I should say conventions and visitors bureau, CVBs. So again, conventions and visitor bureaus. So the conventions and visitor bureaus, they're important because their job essentially is to bring visitors to your city, right? That's one of the things that they want to do, especially business travelers. So they want you to have, let's say, for instance, a conference in that particular city. And so when I used to work in special events, right, one of the things that my colleague did, I didn't do this, but she would work with all the CVBs. And so the conventions and visitor bureaus. And so once we were booked or we agreed to go to that particular city, then we would talk to the CVB and say, okay, well, what venues do you have in this particular city? And so then the CVB would recommend, oh, you should have a show in this particular venue. That's a pretty cool venue, or this venue, or that venue, whatever. So this is why it's important to have a good working relationship as a venue with the CVB, because the CVB is going to bring in tourists, and they may want to do live events in your city, and they're going to be seeking out venues, and so that's why it's good to work with CVBs. Also, chambers of commerce have events, and so you want to have a good working relationship with them. You also want to have a good working relationship with the local hotels or motels. So the Hotel Motel Association, it's good to have a good working relationship with them as well. And any retail associations that are nearby. So for instance, I'm sure the Honda Center has, for instance, a good working relationship with South Coast Plaza, for instance. Because when people are traveling or on vacation or whatever, one of the big things that people do when they're on vacation or on a staycation or a working vacation, they shop in many cases, believe it or not. So they also have to provide outstanding service to your clients. I'm referring obviously to customer service, and work well with your client, whoever your client happens to be. And so I'm trying to think if I had any terrible experiences when I used to work with venues. No, I can't think of. The only terrible relationship that I had was with the venue in Chicago, only because it was a union house, and I would have to pay these guys like literally $20 or whatever just so they can post signage up, and they're driving me crazy. But not really. Anyways, so they have to develop good working relationships with local media. The reason being that you develop good working relationships with local media, because local media can either provide good local coverage of your venue or bad. Outstanding service to your clients. I think I already talked about that. And in terms of customer service, you have to be able to identify new trends within the marketplace. So, the thing about promoters, there's always new promoters coming up in the marketplace. You may not know who they are, but if you're an industry insider, you can make some phone calls to get a sense of who are these new up and coming promoters. So you have to be able to identify who are these new up and coming promoters. And last but not least is direct or personal sales. So meeting with promoters, meeting with agents. So one of the things that we used to do when I used to organize special events and we'd go to these different cities to organize events in these cities, we would go to we would again reach out to the CVBs and say, well, we're looking for a venue that seats capacity of 3,000 or 5,000 or whatever the capacity was. And then they would make a list of recommendations of where would be decent places to have these events or good places to have these events. And so we would go out then or make phone calls to these venues and they would send us information, or we would go and tour the venue and meet with the sales agents on site and meet with them and talk to them about, the logistics of having an event at that particular venue. That's part of the personal or direct selling. Okay, so again, going back, I think I mentioned this already when I talked about stadium tours or even larger venues. So just bear in mind that tenants like sports teams or resident performing art companies. So for instance, there's some venues that are not too big, but relatively big. Maybe they see a capacity between 500 or 1,000. And so what ends up happening sometimes is that they lease the venue to a theater group, for instance, to a local theater group, and essentially that theater group becomes a resident, right, of that venue, and they perform various theater performances in that venue. So maybe, I don't know, they perform The Lion King, or they perform Rent, or they perform Hamilton, or whatever. They perform these various theatrical performances in these venues. And so they become first priority because they're tenants. And so, again, that's one of the challenges of trying to book a tour, is that you have to work around these permanent tenants or that are have first dibs to a venue. So anyways, amphitheater. Amphitheater, the lead time is anywhere from 3 months to 2 years for amphitheaters, depending on the market. So again, 3 months to 2 years. Arenas are between 3 months and 3 years. So again, 3 months and 3 years. And again, it depends on the arena, of course, and the market. Convention centers are anywhere between 3 months and 7 years. And that's very true. And I used to, again, when I worked in events, the person who was in charge of booking convention centers, she would have to book the convention centers 3 years in advance. And mind you, that was in the 90s. And so now we're in 2020. So I wouldn't be shocked that it's now 5 years or even 7 years. So theaters and performing arts centers is 3 months, I should say, 2 years. So 3 months to 2 years. And stadiums between 6 months and 2 years. So again, amphitheaters, 3 months to 2 years. Arenas, 3 months to 3 years. Convention centers, 3 months to 7 years. Theaters, 3 months to 2 years. Stadiums, 6 months to 2 years. The convention centers are tricky, especially if you're trying to book a convention center out like in San Diego. San Diego is just, it's totally backlogged. All right, so the way it works when it comes to venue booking is the promoter inquires for venue information. Again, when we used to travel around to different cities, booking events or putting on events, we would, right? The first thing that we would do, because we were also the promoter, not just booking it, but we were also the promoter, we would ask for information about the venue. So, for instance, what's the seating capacity for the venue? What's the parking situation for the venue? Those sorts of things. Promoter requests for available dates. So again, when we were in a market, we would try to book the venue as soon as possible, because one of the first questions we ask besides information is like, okay, well, are you available on this weekend? So we can kind of figure out what date we want. We want to have the event on a Thursday, or on a Friday, on a Saturday, or on a Sunday. So we would ask for available dates. The venue then, on our behalf, they would turn around and say, well, okay, so what are you guys thinking about producing? What kind of event is it going to be? Do you guys have a production or technical writer? And so it looks something like this. This is what I mean by a production or technical writer. It would ask for, okay, so what kind of setup are you guys going to need? And so us as the promoter, we would reach out to the talent, whoever we were thinking about booking, and we would say, okay, we're thinking about booking the show in this particular venue. Can you send us over a writer? So, because the venue wants information about what you need on stage, what your lighting requirements are like, right? Those sorts of things. And so they would ask for this sort of writer, and then the venue would look at it and say, oh, well, it's like we can't do a stage like that, or maybe we can't do the lighting. We don't have that kind of lighting equipment, so we can't do it here. Or would it be okay for them if we use these sorts of lighting equipment versus what they're asking for? Those sorts of things. And so it's a lot of communication going back and forth between the promoter, between the talent, and between the venue. And so the next thing that you do as a promoter is check for competing events. So what else is going on in the marketplace? So one time we were going to put on a series of events in San Diego, and we had everything booked. We had the venues, we had everything ready to go for San Diego, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the Republicans decided to have their convention in San Diego. And we were just like, oh my God, that's it. We're done. It's over. Because, the Republicans have a lot of money. They can really party. I don't know if you guys ever been to a political convention, but man, there's a lot of whining and dining and partying going on at these conventions, whether it's Democrat or Republican. And so there was no way, right, that we were going to be able to compete with them. And so we actually had to pull out. So you got to think of number one as tentative, as number two as tentative, as number three as tentative, as number four we're still in the tentative. So we had to back out because of San Diego. Thankfully, Republicans were kind enough to buy all our rooms and book and take over our venues. They paid us, thankfully. And we ended up moving to a different city. And so thankfully, again, we hadn't signed anything. Again, check for competing events is tentative. So number 5, promoters' requests for dates to be held. So you number 5 is, again, you're still tentative. And at this stage, and this is important, right? The promoter can request these dates to be held. It doesn't mean that the venue is going to hold them. In other words, right, it could be challenged. So, so for instance, one of our biggest fears, and this is why we moved out of San Diego, and we didn't want to compete against the Republicans, is because we knew that we hadn't signed anything yet. We were still in the tentative stage, and that the Republicans could go in and make the same phone calls we did, and they could bump us, or they can challenge our dates, even though we had already asked for the dates to be held. The Republicans could come in, the event planners for the Republicans could come in and say, we'll challenge, and they could bump us. So number 5, again, is it's tentative, but we can be challenged and bumped off the date. So that's important. So number 6, this is where we get receipts. The promoter receives the entire event rider. So something important to remember, I talk about this in my 346 class a little bit, is the idea of a rider, but I only talk about really only the hospitality rider, or sometimes I talk about the actual backstage or the green room rider. So I don't talk about all the riders. Usually when we organize big events, like big concert tours, these big acts have huge riders. There's a gigantic event rider. And these riders have all sorts of things in there. Not only is it the production technical rider, there's a hospitality rider, there's a security rider, there's a backline rider, there's a, what else? I'm sorry, I know I'm forgetting something. There's a merchandising rider, there's, I'm trying to remember. And there's also all this information along with the writer, like contacts of their management team, their lawyer, their publicist, all sorts of information is included in this event writer. So it's gigantic. It's all this information. So this is when the promoter gets all this information from the talent. Now, number 7, qualifying the event. So again, we're still in tentative. I know you guys think by now it's booked, but no, it's still not booked. The event is not booked yet. We're still trying to work our way through to booking the actual event. So the venue is essentially trying to qualify the event. And so this is essentially where the venue, again, this is where being well respected as the venue, of having lots of contacts in the industry as the venue is really important, because the venue is doing all this background information on the promoter. So in other words, they're going to ask questions like, okay, does the promoter have the necessary experience to pull off this event? That's a big question. Does the promoter have the authority to have this event? In other words, is this person really the boss that I'm talking to? The authority. And does this person have the financial resources to put on the event? Because we don't want to approve this promoter, start marketing or help market the event for this promoter, and then the promoter doesn't have the money to put off the event, and we look like idiots, right? A venue doesn't want to look like an idiot. And so the venue is going to do all this background information on the promoter, make sure that this person's actually a qualified professional who's able to pull off this event. And again, the big question is, right, the venue, on the venue side, as they're vetting, they're also asking the question like, okay, can we really accommodate the event with our space and our production requirements? They're still wrestling with that question. Anyways, negotiation and agreement of rental terms with a required deposit. Generally speaking, the venue is going to ask the promoter, okay, send us over X number of dollars. This is going to help ensure that you're going to have your event at this particular venue. So we're still in tentative until they receive the required deposit, whatever it says in the contract. It says, okay, we want a deposit of $10,000. The promoter sends over the $10,000, and then the venue deposits that money into their bank account. It's not until the venue actually deposits that money into the bank account does the event goes from tentative to now confirmed. So now you go from tentative confirmed upon the depositing of a check. Then the promoter confirms the event date in the venue, making sure everything is correct, because there can be a typo, there can be a miscommunication. Those sorts of things can happen very easily. So you just want to make sure from both the venue side and the promoter side that everybody has the correct date, the correct time, those sorts of things. And so that's under confirmed. Number 10, the issuance of rental agreement by venue should be returned in a few days. And so this is the signed contract. Usually the venue gets it a little bit after the deposit. The reason being is because oftentimes the attorneys, if an attorney needs to be consulted, needs to read through the contract to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and then they're going to send over the contract, the signed contract, which usually happens within a few days or a week after the deposit. And again, we're still unconfirmed. And then the promoter and the venue select the specific on sale dates. So making sure that, okay, if you're gonna have sales at the venue, these are the dates that we want to have the sales started. Number 12, and so we're still unconfirmed. Number 12, venue's receipt. There's a signed rental agreement. The deposit is also been sent to the venue. It's already deposited in the bank. The last thing that needs to happen before the event actually is contracted, because we're still unconfirmed, is a certificate of insurance. So the venue is going to ask the promoter to make sure they have appropriate insurance or pay for insurance in case something goes wrong. And so there's a certificate of insurance. So in case something goes wrong, like somebody dies or there's a riot or something happens. So, like one of the last concerts that I went to before COVID hit, I went to a Maná concert. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Maná, but I went to watch Maná perform over at the Forum. And there was this person that was sitting next to me who, I don't know what she took. I think she took some drug or something. I'm not sure what she did. Anyways, she started throwing up like crazy and then just passed out. Out. Like to the point where we had to call the paramedics, and we're not even sure if she was breathing, honestly. And so for those types of situations, right, you need to have the promoter as well as the venue needs to have insurance. And last but not least, and I've already gone over time, geez, again, I talk too much. Anyways, the last thing means it's contracted. So everything that I talked about was either in tentative or it was confirmed, but it wasn't yet contracted. We don't reach contracted until we reach 13. Or I should say 12. After the certificate of insurance is signed, everything, both venues agree, there's a signed rental agreement, there's a deposit, both sides have their insurance, and then that's contracted or contracted, and then we have the event goes on sale, that's also contracted.